in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Princess Diana was loved by millions all over the world. When she died, the streets were full of flowers, strangers hugged, and the whole country was very sad. But inside the palace, things were different. There was no warmth, no tears, only cold silence. Now, Princess Anne has finally spoken about what really happened. She didn't blame anyone, but shared the truth that even Camilla cannot deny. Was her death in Paris really just fate, or the final result of heartbreak, betrayal, and a love triangle too powerful to ignore? Diana's golden cage. To the outside world, Diana's life seemed perfect. She wore beautiful dresses sparkled with jewels, and her smile lit up every room she entered. Wherever she went, people reached out to touch her hand, to see her face, to feel her kindness. To millions, she was a real-life princess from a fairy tale. But behind the palace walls, that fairy tale had a darker side. The glitter faded the moment the cameras stopped flashing. Diana often described her life as a golden cage, a beautiful prison where every move was watched, every smile rehearsed, and every tear hidden away. She was only 19 when she married the future king. Young, shy, and hopeful, she believed love could conquer anything. Yet almost immediately she realized her marriage was not what she had imagined. Charles was distant, often preoccupied, and emotionally unreachable. His heart, it seemed, already belonged to someone else, Camilla. At public events, Diana played her role perfectly. She waved, she smiled, and she charmed the world. But when she returned to her rooms in Kensington Palace, the silence echoed. She was surrounded by staff and luxury, yet she often said she had never felt more alone. Princess Anne noticed this long before the public did. At dinners and family gatherings, Anne observed the quiet moments, how Diana's laughter didn't quite reach her eyes, how she sometimes stared off into space as if lost in thought. While others ignored her sadness, Anne saw it clearly. But within the royal family, emotions were rarely spoken of. Feelings were something to be hidden, not healed. It's said that during one evening meal, when others were laughing and discussing hunting trips, Diana sat silently pushing her food around her plate. Anne later described her as a young woman drowning in silence. That silence became the invisible wall between Diana and the rest of the royal household. Diana's famous words that her wedding day felt like a lamb to the slaughter captured that haunting truth. Even from the beginning, she sensed that love alone would not save her. It was the start of a royal chapter that would leave scars the world could not see. Princess Anne's reflections make people wonder, was Diana's death in Paris truly just an accident? Or was it the tragic final act in a story that had been unraveling for years, shaped by loneliness, heartbreak, and a palace too proud to change? The other woman. From the very first days of Diana and Charles's marriage, there was a shadow, Camilla Parker Bowles. Though presented to Diana as an old friend, Camilla was far more than that. Before Diana entered the picture, Charles and Camilla had shared a deep and complicated bond. Though duty and timing had separated them, that affection never faded. For Diana, Camilla was the ghost she could never escape. At social events, Diana could feel Camilla's presence even when she wasn't in the room. A glance, a whisper, a private joke between Charles and Camilla. It was enough to remind her she was the outsider in her own marriage. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she famously said, "so it was a bit crowded." To the world, Diana and Charles looked like the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, she struggled with jealousy, betrayal, and deep emotional pain. Her husband's loyalty seemed divided, and her confidence began to crumble. In her private recordings, Diana once admitted that she confronted Camilla directly. It wasn't anger that fueled her words, but heartbreak. She simply wanted honesty. She told Camilla, "I know what's going on between you and Charles. I just want you to know that I know." For Diana, the emotional burden was unbearable. Every time Charles disappeared for meetings or phone calls that stretched late into the night, she felt that invisible wedge grow deeper. Even her attempts to save the marriage were met with formality and distance. The fairy tale that captivated the world was slowly becoming a tragedy of 3 hearts entangled in impossible love. For Diana, being adored by millions meant little when the man she loved seemed to belong to someone else. Some say Charles's love for Camilla never ended, and that Diana's presence was more a matter of duty than destiny. If that was true, Was her heartbreak inevitable? Was her role predetermined by royal tradition rather than by love? Anne's silent watch. Princess Anne was one of the few royals who saw Diana up close when the cameras weren't around. At family dinners, she noticed the moments others ignored. Anne rarely spoke out, but in later years, her words painted a haunting picture. She said Diana carried a sadness that no one inside the palace seemed willing to face. The world adored her. Yet within those royal walls, she often sat alone. Was it loyalty to the crown that kept Anne silent? Or was she too bound by duty to reach out? Perhaps Anne believed Diana's struggles were private battles, not palace business. But silence can be louder than words. And in Diana's case, silence may have been the cruelest companion of all. The breaking point. Diana once described her marriage as unbearable, filled with more tears than smiles. But what was the final straw? When did the fairy tale completely shatter? Some point to Charles's public closeness with Camilla, others to the constant pressure of living under the relentless spotlight. Diana herself admitted that her wedding day felt wrong, that her instincts screamed of a trap. And yet, she went through with it, hoping love might come later. Instead, the cracks deepened, arguments behind closed doors, loneliness in grand palaces, the heavy silence of a husband's absence. Diana reached a point where she no longer hid her pain. In interviews, her words shook the monarchy. "I was crying out for help, but no one listened." Was it a marriage that killed her spirit, or a system too cold to let her be human? Paris at midnight. August 31st, 1997. In Paris was the night when everything changed. The story the world knows is simple. Diana, with Dodi Fayed, fleeing paparazzi in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. A crash, silence, and then a flood of tears across every corner of the globe. But what was Diana really doing in Paris? Was she chasing new love or trying to escape old wounds? Some reports suggest she had been restless that entire summer, her heart still caught between freedom and a past she could never escape. Eyewitnesses remember her looking uneasy, even moments before the car left the Ritz. Was it fate, or was it something more? The palace silence. When news of Diana's death reached the royal family, the public expected an immediate show of emotion. Instead, there was nothing. Days passed before a single word was spoken from behind the palace gates. The people wept openly, piling flowers and notes outside Buckingham Palace. Yet the monarchy remained quiet. To many, that silence felt like rejection, a confirmation that Diana's warmth had never truly belonged within those walls. Only after public anger swelled did the Queen address the nation. Her words were steady, her voice calm, but the damage was done. The silence of those first few days had already spoken louder than any statement could. It was then that Princess Anne reportedly reflected on how deeply Diana's life and death had shaken the institution. The monarchy had been forced to confront its own heartlessness. The lesson was painful but clear. Even tradition must bend to humanity. Diana's passing became a turning point, a moment when the crown realized that emotion is not weakness and silence can destroy more than it protects. Whispers that never died. Even decades after Paris, the questions never stopped. Conspiracy theories, whispered stories, and rumors too heavy to ignore still circle around Diana's name. Some whisper she was silenced because she had become too powerful. Others believe her final years were carefully watched, her every move under scrutiny. And then there are the quieter whispers, not of politics or scandal, but of heartbreak. That Diana died not because of power, but because of love. Because her heart was caught between the man she married and the woman who stood between them. One truth is certain: Diana's story did not end in Paris. It lives on in every question asked, every secret hinted at, and every tear shed when the people's princess is remembered. It shows us that the most powerful stories are not always the ones played out in front of the cameras, but the ones hidden behind closed doors. Stories of love, loss, and silence that never fade. Princess Diana's life reminds us that even the brightest star can feel trapped in the darkest cage. And yet, her legacy still shines, sparking questions that remain unanswered even decades later. What do you think? Was Diana's fate sealed by destiny? Or was it shaped by heartbreak, betrayal, and choices inside the palace? Share your thoughts in the comments below.